Hi, this is Greg Kilstrom. Welcome to Season 3 of the Agile World, where we discuss customer and employee experience, organizational and workforce transformation, and how business can adapt and continually improve in an agile age. The Agile World podcast is brought to you by TEKsystems, an industry leader in full-stack technology services, talent services, and real-world application. For more information, go to teksystems.com. To read more about the topics discussed in this show, you can go to my website at theagile.world and read my latest articles, or get a copy of my latest book, The Agile Workforce, now available on Amazon and other retailers. My name is Greg Kilstrom, and I'm the host of the Agile World podcast. Welcome to a special episode of the show brought to you by Attribution, an advanced multi-touch attribution company that empowers every marketer with the data to convert more buyers and maximize ROI. You can learn more about Attribution at www.attributionapp.com. Today, we're going to talk about the power of doing marketing attribution well and the impact that it can have on your marketing objectives. To help me discuss this topic, I'd like to welcome David Hiltner, CEO of Attribution. David, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Greg. Happy to be here. Love the topic, obviously.
Yeah. Looking forward to talking about this with you. So why don't you start by giving a little background on Attribution and your role there?
Yeah, so I'm a recently hired CEO of Attribution. I'm actually was a user of Attribution at 4 other organizations where I led the growth teams at those locations. 3 startups and an enterprise organization. But I used Attribution to really kind of guide and understand better the metrics of our customer journey and our customers and our users. And so lucky enough to join Attribution. I have over 23 years digital marketing experience in a variety of areas, including social, paid advertising, both in the B2C and the B2B world. But more recently, I'd say like the last 7 years, really dove more into the growth side of things on the marketing side, and analytics were a big part of, or is a big part of, what I do best. I think now more than anything else, looking for areas of correlation and ways to really kind of drive new opportunities through demand gen centric programs. So I'm happy to be here and excited to be talking to you about this.
Yeah, well, let's start our conversation about attribution by just defining things and making sure that everybody understands what we're talking about. So, how would you define multi-touch marketing attribution, and what are the benefits?
What happens in today's day and age? I think there's a lot of variables when a customer comes in and eventually buys your product, right? So I think that what ends up happening is a customer doesn't just magically think of your company and then come in and then buy. I mean, it probably does happen occasionally,
Right.
but it's not the norm, right? So in most cases, what ends up happening is from a customer journey standpoint, a customer comes in through awareness, something that you've done, whether it's through a piece of content, maybe an ABM campaign that you had that was sponsored content or something like that, that really kind of drove that user into who you are and what you're about through some type of educational piece. And then at that point, they got to know your company, and so they started doing more research, and they noticed that, hey, look, we have a need here, and so they go through the consideration stage, and so you have some campaigns to help kind of manage that process. So there's other pieces of content, or whether it's an ad campaign, whatever it may be. The customer then sees you again, comes back and looks again around and starts to define like their criteria of making a buying decision, right? So, and then at the end of the day, they probably pick out 2 to 3 different vendors that they're deciding on during the buying stage, and again, this is where your campaigns come into play, and they may do something. It could be something as simple as like last touch, and they come in through a branding campaign, and then they come in and buy at that point. All of that is extremely valuable, I think, and understanding those correlations as much as possible will help you make better decisions in terms of like how that customer DNA interacts with your product. And the reason why I say DNA is because Basically, I think that even if you're in the same industry, the customer journey is a little bit different. It doesn't matter what company you're at or who you are. If you're in, even if you're, like I said, if you're in the same industry, there's nuances on how the customer interacts with your product and the type of content that they digest, and also the type of ad campaigns that they're running as well, like how people are interacting with your messaging, and all of that kind of plays into that whole customer journey play through the funnel process. And so really trying to understand that through analytics, and it helping kind of guide you through that process is extremely important. So when I think of multi-touch attribution, I think of like the DNA of the customer and really kind of trying to understand that as best as possible, and then making better decisions through, whether it's, like I said, like whether it's through content. When you're if you write a piece of content that's a great blog piece that brings people in, that educates them in the market, and you see that, hey, look, we brought in a lot of opportunities through this piece of content. Maybe we want to replicate that as much as possible through the same, maybe a similar topic, or kind of going down that path. So anyway, so that's how I see attribution, and really kind of really defining how you optimize your campaigns or your content, and the customer journey to better facilitate better opportunities, and ultimately at the end of the day, more sales and revenue.
Yeah, so definitely sounds like it's important to understand investment. It's important to optimize the customer journey, the customer experience. So why aren't more organizations doing it well? So my question for you would be, what are some of the key challenges that marketers have in doing multi-touch attribution well? And if maybe give a few examples.
When I think of the challenges that probably happen, or what the major use cases are for attribution, I think that there's actually three different use cases on how I've used attribution in the past. And one is understanding, for budgeting purposes, right? Like you're going into next year, and you have a budget that you're, as a marketer, you're looking to, like, what should our ad budget look like? How many people on content should we have? Like, what does that all look like? And with a tool and some analytics, it should be able to kind of guide you in terms of like where your spend should be at, and how much you should be spending. And again, it really kind of breaks down to, from a marketing perspective, really understanding, like, hey, look, we got all this content at the top of the funnel. That's great. We have really good middle of the funnel, content or assets that we're pushing out, whether it's a webinar or whatever it may be. And then we also have some really great bottom of the content assets, and then really kind of understanding like which ones of those are really producing at a high level for you, and then kind of banking on that going into the next year. And so you want to make sure that you have the resources allocated for that going into the year. And then at that point, as you're seeing how things are evolving, because the market shifts, and what was working 6 months ago or a year ago might not be working today as much as it was at that point. So you're constantly testing, you're constantly running experiments, you're constantly, or you should be constantly understanding like how to better optimize those different channels that you have that you're running. And so you constantly are looking at your budget to see like what you should be banking on going in, and optimizing your budget throughout the year. So I think a good fiscal responsibility through that part of it, I think, is important to really understand, like where you should be maybe pulling back on a campaign that's not necessarily generating. It may be generating a lot of leads, but might not be generating a lot of quality opportunities. And so again, I think that's one use case that I think I generally look at. The second use case is the traditional like multi-touch attribution, which we just talked about, which is understanding the DNA of your customer, the customer journey, doing as best as you possibly can to bank on which platforms are working for you, which ones aren't. In some ways, really trying to replicate that experience as much as possible through that journey. Whether again, doubling down on maybe a piece of content that's really generating a lot of opportunities, and maybe at the top of the funnel where you're driving a lot of quality inbounds, or interest in your product or service, and then all the way through that funnel process that I spoke about earlier. So really kind of understanding that, and it can also be like webinars and organic side of things. It doesn't have to be all paid, so really that side of it, really that traditional side of attribution, I think is extremely important to really, again, understanding and optimizing those different channels throughout the year. And then the third use case, I think, more than anything else, is the uh, from a growth perspective, you're constantly, as I was explaining earlier, you're constantly experimenting, right? So you have hypothesis of like different ad channels that are popping up, and you want to test out these different channels, and really want to see where, hey, I think that, if we build this piece of content, we sponsor this piece of content through this ad channel, what type of results are we going to get? And we think it's going to be a top of funnel or middle of funnel type of process, as an example. But at the end of the day, it comes back and it's like, really, you're getting it is a top of funnel, and it comes back and it's like, yeah, we're getting a lot of high quality interest early on. It's first touch. We're really seeing a lot of like, opportunities that are coming through the door at that point. And so it allows you to see like, hey, this is, this channel is working well for us, or maybe it's not, and it's not doing quite as well as you thought it was going to, and maybe you can pull back from it and test something else out. So really kind of understanding that those different areas also, I think, plays a big role in understanding, again, the customer journey, understanding the funnel process, and really kind of helping you get a better return on your investments, whether it's the different resources on content or organic or paid channels, whatever it may be, webinars, events, all of that play,
Yeah.
different roles, and again, gives you, I think, a better understanding of which direction you should go as a marketer, or even in the data science world.
Yeah, so your platform attribution has solved for these types of challenges. Um, do you want to talk a little bit about the approach, like how you've approached this, and why you're why you're unique in this space?
The way attribution, I think our uniqueness is more about the ease of implementation more than anything else.
Yeah,
Setting up attribution modeling can be somewhat trying, I think, for most organizations. And having done it myself, I know from from my past that that's definitely something that could, slow down that process a little bit.
yeah,
But with attribution, it's a much easier process in terms of onboarding and getting set up. And we have quite a few integrations that we've built out and continuously working on. So I think that those are areas that we're evolving as an organization. But we also, the nice thing about attribution, for me at least, is that, as a marketer, one of the things that we do is we segment our assets that we have, that we built, whether it's different advertising channels, or the content itself, and we tried to segment it to, as I explained earlier, the different funnel pieces, whether it's at the awareness stage, consideration, or buying stage. And so understanding like those, where these different channels. So give you an example, like you have like a branding um, campaign that you're running through PPC. Chances are, through that branding, it's more bottom of the funnel. You know that as a marketer, when you're building that out, when somebody goes to a search engine and they type in your brand name,
right.
chances are they're going to come directly to you, because they already know who you are, they've already done their research. And but it's still very important at the bottom, right? Because it shows up, and it's very easy for the user or the consumer or the prospect to come in and then buy at that point, right? So you're making it very easy. So it's an important piece to your marketing mix. So really understanding like where that all kind of comes into it plays a huge role. And I think that with attribution, with our analytics and the visual aspects that we have of it, allows you to see like different reporting items to actually help you make those better decisions. So you can see it all the way through that funnel process, like exactly like what type of engagements you're getting, and then also the obviously the conversions, and then also the revenue that comes in as well. So you can see the return on investment for each one of those channels, and what type of revenue that you're producing from those. So it allows you to make again easier decisions fiscally to really kind of understand where you should be maybe doubling down in other areas because you're seeing a much higher return on investment and a much faster sales process through that whole journey. So
Yeah.
so again, that's the nice thing about attribution. And again, it's somewhat easy to onboard and get started almost right away.
Yeah. And so, talking about ROI and things, what are metrics of success when you work with a customer? How do you measure the success of your engagement with them, as well as how are they looking at metrics of success?
Yeah, I think that ultimately the success is like, hey, are we able to see what type of return on investment we're seeing with our different channels and resources? Meaning that are we able to get a clear picture of what we're actually doing? Are we able to use the reports, and are we able to use the analytics to really kind of guide us and make suggestions throughout that process? And again, it's are we able to optimize essentially? So like as you have different ad channels and you're running different campaigns and you're constantly optimizing those campaigns, are you seeing better results out of that? And being able to easily monitor that and kind of build that out, I think is greatly important as we continue to grow. And from a growth perspective, I think that those are looking at those areas within the channels. I think that that's super important. So I guess if you're asking like what are the key metrics, I think it kind of comes down to, or the main KPIs. It comes down to your what your conversion rates are throughout the funnel process for each one of those different areas, and then also what is the return on investment. So what are you seeing back in terms of revenue? Are those opportunities? Are you not so much lead gen driven, or are you more demand gen? And the difference is demand gen is driving. You may have less opportunities coming in, but they're higher value, and you get more out of them, as opposed to lead gen, where you're kind of chasing a much more larger number of leads that are out there, but also aren't generating from a conversion rate standpoint, aren't generating the right opportunities. The other side of it is like you can start to see like where there's potentially even a leaky funnel through that customer journey, meaning that as you're bringing somebody in through the awareness stage, they go through the consideration stage, but all of a sudden you're not converting at a higher rate than what you're used to with different channels. You can start to see like, oh, look, we're not converting into a sale, or from the buying stage, we're not seeing that customer through that entire process. We can see like where there's like what we call a leaky funnel. So it allows you to focus in and dive deeper into where those opportunities are potentially being missed. The other cool thing about attribution, I just kind of want to point this out, Greg, is
Yeah.
that you can do deep dives into your customer base as well. So if one of the cool things is that you can model out like a successful customer. So if you bring in a decent size enterprise customer, or a customer you want to like maybe model from a company perspective, you can do a deep dive into how they came in, what pieces of content they digested through the funnel process, what that customer journey looked like, and you can start to say like, oh yeah, we want to do this more often, so we're going to try this again and see if this is another. And so you start to kind of build a picture, an understanding of like, hey, yeah, this is like we want this customer was fruitful for us, but also it was uh, a fast time to conversion, or fast time to customer. It was much faster than our normal process. Let's try to model that more often and see if there's more of that we can do. So again, it gives you sort of those opportunities as well. So and so that's another area that I liked about attribution too, is that you can do a deep dive into everything about that customer that came in and how they came in and what they did. So it's important to like really kind of, it made me feel like, hey, look, I have at least a winning hand here on how I could replicate this as many times as I possibly can to get better results. And at the end of the day, that's what you're looking for from a marketing perspective, is how much pipeline can you build, and then how fast can that how fast does that pipeline close?
Diving a little more into some of the use cases. So, multi-touch attribution can work well for both B2C and B2B marketers, even though, there's some differences in approach and tactics may differ and things. So why don't you talk a little bit about that? Some of the differences between multi-touch attribution approach for B2C versus B2B marketers.
Yeah, I think it, like you said, it works well with both sides of the equation, right? So, like, I mean, you're still going through. I mean, essentially, the customer journey is what you're trying to replicate, and so on the B2C side, obviously, it's a lot of times more plentiful in terms of like the numbers that are coming in, as opposed to one company coming in, two companies. What the size of the organizations, and so the strategies obviously are a little bit different in terms of like your advertising campaigns and your content mix and how the user is coming in, and actually finding what they need on your site. Tracking those pages, like what are they doing when they jump on your site? Like what does that journey look like? Or is the pricing page like resonating when they jump on it? Or are you able to see that and say like, oh yeah, there's a lot of like people come over on the B2C side, people come over, see the pricing, and then they jump, and it's like not that big a deal. Or they get into the checkout area, and it's like, oh, all of a sudden they jump. And so maybe there's opportunity there to optimize that as a marketer. So understanding those analytics again kind of gets back. It's in a lot of ways it's very similar, like between the B2C and the B2B side of things. It's just what attribution allows you to do is really kind of get that full picture of what's actually happening. So and again, like I said, the tactics obviously are a lot different between B2B and B2C, and the strategies are a lot different. But at the end of the day, what you're trying to do is get understand like why people are finding you as a brand, what they do when they come in, how they interact with your website, how they interact with your content, how they interact with your other ad platforms that are out there. And then the secondary piece of it is like, how do they buy? How are they coming in and then buying at that point? Whereas, and then obviously B2C, it's more about speed and through the checkout process more so than anything on the like more, and like I guess more on the e-com side of things. But
Yeah.
on the B2B side, it's a little longer a lot of times, but still very similar in those aspects. And that actually brings up another point that attribution also solves. It's and I want to just kind of talk through this, is that in a lot of ways what some of the some of the struggles that I think a lot of marketers get is they're running a bunch of different ad channels, and so they get conversions that are through different analytics tools or insights that they're running through those ad channels, and they're all counting those conversions, right? So
Yeah.
they all count them as like one conversion. And so you may get one customer come in and you get like three or four conversions that are being counted from those ad channels. And so you think like, hey, look, we're getting a lot of conversions from
Right.
this marketing mix, but the reality is it's one customer. And so you really the other solve that attribution brings, and I think it's also very important, is being able to like add like hey, look, if it was top of funnel, you get a percent. If it's middle of the funnel, you get a percent. If it's bottom of the funnel, you get a percent. And so all of a sudden now that one customer is being counted once as opposed to multiple times. So, and that's where it could also, when you're looking back and you're looking at your ad spend and you're looking at what's working, what's not working, what it does is it actually makes it's one customer, it's not multiple. You're not getting multiple
Yeah.
conversions, so you don't feel, you may not feel as good about like, hey, we're, instead of us getting five conversions, we're only getting one. So now it's four less than what you thought you were getting. But at the end of the day, it makes you smarter in terms of like how you go about targeting those different channels, and doing more of it. And so what's the ultimate goal of all of this is to drive and produce higher revenue at the end of the day, right? And that's
Right.
what we're all judged on. And how many sales we're bringing in, the number of logos we're bringing in, all of that plays a big role in the success that we're driving here, whether it's in marketing, sales, or product engineering. Everybody has a say in that process, and so I think that that's what we're all judged on. And so if you can do more of that and actually show like, hey, this is what is actually producing, really kind of can paint a really nice picture on how to move forward, and give you more realistic opportunities, and again, like I said before, like driving more demand gen opportunities. So
Yeah.
yep.
Well, one last question before we wrap up here. For marketers that are not doing this and want to get started, what's the best way for somebody to wrap their head around, initial things they should be thinking about? How do they get started? What are
Yeah.
your thoughts for them?
Yeah, I think that some of the basics that I think sometimes are lost in a lot. One of the things I see a lot when I join an organization is that you have different engines moving, right? You have a data engine moving. You have a content engine that's being produced. You have somebody working on demand gen advertising. You have somebody working on social media. You have all these like fragmented areas within the organization, and you really aren't in a lot of ways. And I don't want to say this, obviously it's not for everybody, but like one of the things that I try to do is really try to organize like what pieces of content do we have and which ones are doing the best at the top of the funnel, which campaigns, like what ABM campaigns maybe that are driving like awareness, as opposed, and again, those goals are a little bit different, obviously, when you're going through, like, so like an ABM campaign, and if you're doing an ABM campaign that's more of awareness, your goals aren't really at the end of the day to drive you know lead gen as much, or conversions as much, as it is about like, hey, we want to drive engagement, we want to see people download our content, we want to see people and share our content, we want to see people like read and open it up, and whether it's and it could be like an email campaign as well, all of that kind of plays into it. So I think that the first thing that you would want to do is make sure that your everything is what you have a strategy behind every piece of your every campaign that you're running, every channel that you have, and that like, hey, this is meant to do this and this is meant to do that. So going into it, and the reason why I say this, Greg, is because going into it and understanding like where everything is will allow you to then, once you start to put these analytics in place, and once you put the analytics in place, it'll allow you to be smarter in terms of like, hey, yeah, this was what we were trying to do, and yes, we are getting the results that we were expecting out of it, or oh no, we're not getting the expected results out of it. So it immediately shows you where what in your marketing mix is working and doing really well, and some that aren't doing as well. So getting started is pretty easy in terms of like just making sure that everything's organized. But then obviously come to Attribution. We'll certainly talk to you about understand a little bit more about your business modeling, what you're trying to accomplish, and then also we'll certainly demo the product for you and show you where what we can do, like, and that's the other side of it, so that you can get a better understanding of what the dashboard looks like, how the reports work, all of that stuff. And we'll also talk to you about your integrations and what how it all kind of works together and how fast we could get set up. So yeah, that's the ease of it. So
Nice. Yeah, great. Well, David, thanks so much for joining the show. For those listening, what's the best way for them to keep up with what you're doing?
you can go to our website, attribution app.com/blog. We're updating. We're launching new products every day. We have a great, as a matter of fact, we're launching a new product called the Data Connector, and allows you as a user of our product to bring in more data for your data scientists who want to like model out more attribution data, and you want to see different reporting, and allows them to do that. So you can go and take a look there. Plus, we're updating our integrations every day and updating those and adding to them. So you can go there, and we generally update everybody at the blog. But we also, we have social media out there through LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter as well.
Great. Well, yeah, no, and I'm looking forward to talking with you some more in some future episodes as well. Well, again, I'd like to thank David Hiltner, CEO of Attribution, for joining the show. Thanks for listening to the Agile World with Greg Kihlstrom in this special episode of the show brought to you by Attribution, an advanced multi-touch attribution company that empowers every marketer with the data to convert more buyers and maximize ROI. You can learn more about Attribution at www.attributionapp.com. See you next week. Thanks again for listening to the Agile World podcast, brought to you by Tech Systems. I'm your host, Greg Kihlstrom. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to subscribe on your podcast channel of choice and leave us a rating so that others can find the show more easily. You can learn more and get a copy of my latest book, The Agile Workforce, from my website at theagile.world.